Hi guys, Ramsey here. Welcome to another video. Today I have a very special video for you guys because something ended up happening that sparked this video, and that is a purchase gone awry. I'll tell you what happened. I bought this bottle, okay, which as you can see, this is a vintage original 1977 version of Opium with the built-in sprayer, Opium for Women, which is one of my favorite women's fragrances of all time, actually. It was released in 1977. It made my top 10 all-time favorite perfumes list. And somebody in the comments said, you have to get the one with the built-in sprayer. That's the original. It's different from the Gucci-PPR version of Opium, which looks like this. And the cap comes off, like so. Which this is the version that I initially wore in love, as you can see. And so what I've done is I bought this bottle and I got it on a site called Mercari, which can only be used in the United States, apparently. The woman marked it as a 60 milliliter bottle, okay? It's actually she marked it as a 2 ounce. It's actually a 1.2 ounce, 36 milliliter bottle. And I got this for $92. And I thought I was getting an absolute steal for 60 milliliters. So now I'm a little torn. Am I going to keep it? Am I not going to keep it? And I figured I might as well do a comparison. I have the bottle. I have the return shipping label. I can always decide to send it back, or I can decide to hang on to it. So I have the vintage on my left hand. I have the current on my right hand. And I have 2 bonus fragrances to join. So this is not just going to be a comparison. It's not just going to be a triple comparison, because I have the Secret de Parfum on the inside of my crook of my left elbow. And I have the original grandmother of them all, Vintage Youth Dew, on the inside of my right crux of my elbow. So I really hope I have the words to even do this review, because, this is a fragrance that I feel like I owe it, to the fragrance, because it's such a special fragrance. It came out in 77, like I said. This actually came out in the 1950s. This came out in, Youth Dew came out in the mid-50s, if I'm not mistaken. I'd have to go look to see exactly what day it came, what was the date that it came out. But so we're talking, vintage fragrances. And the reason that I think this is going to be a little bit tough for me is that they all smell different, but they all also smell alike, okay? So let's just keep it simple and start with the vintage on my left hand here. So what you get when you spray the vintage compared to the one that I know and love, okay? So what you get is you get this almost like it travels immediately to the base. And that kind of shocked me, because this doesn't travel to the base immediately. In fact, when this opens up, the one on my right hand, we'll say the Gucci-PPR version, okay? This opens up very aldehydic with clove and incense. And the clove and incense is really what my nose pick up on this version that I'm used to. Now, what threw me for a loop with the vintage is that the vintage went straight to the base. Immediately to the base is what it felt like. And I don't know if that's because of age or what, but what you got is you got this heavy oak moss, which is kind of what you expect from the vintage, right? It feels much darker, it feels spicier, and it feels dirtier in a way, the vintage does. Now, what I think is happening is I think this had to be reformulated, either due to costs, when the 2000s came around and Tom Ford was in control. They had to kind of make a little bit more money, so they reformulated it. or they had to because of regulations. I don't know, but here everything kind of feels a little bit more, 3D. In fact, the key notes in this, if you've never smelled opium, to me, cloves, you get some fruity mixture. Some people say plum or orange or, whatever it may be. There's a bay leaf note, which is also found in Jubilation 25. There's beautiful sandalwood. There's patchouli. There's orris. There's peach. There's rose. But the biggest thing is the incense, the myrrh, the cloves. And then there's supposedly this dirty castoreum, okay? I don't get very much of the dirty castoreum here, but I do get it here. The vintage on my left hand feels much heavier, denser, dirtier. And I thought when I first smelled this perfume, when I first sprayed it and enjoyed it and wore it, I thought that this was a masterpiece. There's no way to improve on it. However, smelling it side by side, I can't believe I'm going to say this, but this version, the one that I know and love, almost feels thin compared to this version, okay? It almost feels a little bit more synthetic, if you will, believe it or not. Now, because of that, though, I will say I've had these on my arm now for about 4.5 hours, okay? It's 11:34 here. So 4.5 hours or so I've had these on my arm, on my hands. And I will tell you that I think this one projects much more. It's a bigger fragrance because of the inclusion of some of those more modern synthetics that were not there in the original. So you get this in the original. In the original, you get this almost old school pillowy oak moss, okay? So if you've ever smelled Azure, the vintage Azure that I've shown on many of my videos, go look for my women's fragrance video if you haven't watched it. There's an Azure bottle that I show off from Estee Lauder as well. And it has some of the most amazing oak moss you could ever imagine. And that's a women's fragrance. And you get that pillowy oak moss here in the vintage. It's also, I mentioned it's more animalic because of the castoreum. The other thing that it is that kind of really shocked me is it's much more smoky. And I wasn't expecting that smokiness to come out more. I thought that these would be very, very similar, to be honest with you. Somebody said, if you buy this, the vintage, you'll only want to wear this and not wear this. And I think I understand where they're coming from now that I've done a comparison, because I never got this comparison in my mind. It's impossible when you only wear one fragrance like this at a time. This is your scent of the day, let's say. You don't have a fragrance side by side to do a comparison. It's impossible to pick out, small, minute differences that we're talking about. But when you wear them, one hand versus the other, you really can see the differences, show themselves. And here, this version that I know and love, basically, this is my baby. This version seems to me to be more aromatic. It seems to even have maybe a little bit less of the dark resins that this version has. And again, the thing that I really wasn't expecting is that this version smells much more bitter when you compare. Bitter aromatic, if that makes sense. Myrrh gives off this bitter aromatic smell, I think, on its own, depending on how it was used, when it was harvested, the time in the myrrh's, life cycle, or the time of year that it's harvested can change the smell of myrrh from time to time. The other thing that I will tell you, and I get it in this, and I'm going to bring in Youth Dew now, is that these two, so this came out in the 50s for women. This came out by a woman named Josephine Catapano, Okay, Josephine Catapano also created a fragrance that I'm going to dive into more. I bought 3 bottles. I got a steal. I got a lump steal together on 3 bottles. 2 were Cosmere, 1 was Warner, and that's called Chaps by Ralph Lauren, which I absolutely love. That fragrance blew me away. It was not what I kind of remembered it from my childhood, but it was not exactly how I remembered it. She also made that fragrance, so I need to do a deep dive into that sometime soon. This one, the original, if you will, the grandmother of all of this stuff, starts out on my skin almost like this spicy cola vibe. So imagine if you took like a cola, like just a Coke or a Pepsi, and you added some sort of warm, Christmassy spices, if you will. That's how this starts. This gives off a cola vibe that I don't get from the Gucci-PPR era EDT. I don't get it from the vintage EDT. And I don't get it from the Secret de Parfum, which came out in 1992 and is now discontinued. And I'll get to this one in a second. But this one gives off this spiced, you still get some aldehydes in the opening, but you get this almost like spiced cola vibe, which makes it a little bit unique, to be honest with you. And I got this bottle a few years back for like $20 on eBay. No one bid against me. And it was like here or something, you know. It wasn't full, but this is a older version of Youth Dew, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know how to necessarily age these. It does have the E right here, so it can't be too old, but old enough that the oak moss in this smells absolutely divine. Absolutely divine. And so you get this cola type vibe in the opening, and then it kind of reminds you a whole lot of vintage of Opium. These two, this one and this one, are very similar to each other. These two are the closest, I would say, to each other as far as just smell goes, and that makes sense because this was almost, you know, I don't want to say inspired. It was inspired by Youth Dew, let's say. Opium was inspired by Youth Dew. And what sets these apart, I would say, from these, and it's something I never would have come across had I not done a side-by-side comparison, is the dry down in this. Strangely, you get this especially here, you get this vetiver note that completely came out of left field. I get no vetiver in this, none. I get incense, clove, myrrh, resins, you know, that kind of stuff. It's not as dirty. And I can see why I like this so much, because of all of the ones that I sprayed, the Secret de Parfum is still lasting well too, but this one really lasts. It lasts, it projects, it's you know, Rich Mitch actually said he got a compliment when he wore this once. And so people around you definitely will smell you. This oriental, warm, spicy type vibe can be very appealing. And the synthetics in this, I feel like, are amped up compared to the vintage, for sure. Also, sticking with the comparison between Youth Dew and Opium, Youth Dew, for some reason, I get this increased floral vibe that I don't get from the original. You know, Opium is known as one of the greatest Orientals of all time. And Orientals are supposed to use these resins, you know, stuff like that. But you get this, you get a little bit of a floral. Parfumo actually lists lavender as a note here in Youth Dew. And I don't think they list lavender in any way in any of the other opiums. Yeah, there's no lavender listed. So you get this almost like a manly. What's crazy about this fragrance to me, it was released for women in the 50s, right? But you get lavender in the top and you get vetiver in the base. Now, those are two very manly notes, okay? In between, there's all kind of stuff going on. There is so the florals are rose, narcissus, carnation, orchid, lily of the valley, jasmine, ylang. That's a big floral breakdown, right? And then in the base, what really is interesting about this and this, whoops, again, these two are closely linked. These two are long lost cousins, brothers, sisters, whatever you want. They both have frankincense in the note breakdown. And I thought that was really interesting because, you know, frankincense and myrrh are tied together to forever, to biblical times. You know, frankincense and myrrh is a huge winning combination. And sometimes they can even smell like each other. Sometimes myrrh can smell like frankincense, and frankincense can smell like myrrh, and it can kind of throw you off. And I don't get so much of a frankincense feel from this, and I don't get so much of a frankincense feel from this. Okay, these two go in a different direction. I'll talk about this one in just a second. But I do get this vetiver frankincense feel from these two, especially in the dry down. So just to recap, this is darker, it's dirtier, it has that pillowy oak moss that I love in fragrances like Vintage Azure. It feels 3D. Oh, by the way, I should mention one other thing in this that is also very surprising with the with this vintage EDT formula that I have here. Is this, the resins in this, whether it's due to age or how it was stored, or maybe it's just the way that the myrrh feels, but this almost gives off like this leather type accord in the base. There's no leather listed in Opium. There's a bunch of stuff going on. There's a Papanax, there's labdanum. Labdanum can sometimes give off a leathery feel, but it doesn't smell like the leather of labdanum fragrances that I know. It almost smells like the balsams are giving some kind of leather accord, which is a little bit strange, to be honest. Not really what I was expecting. But I really do love it. Now, do let me know. I paid $90 for this 36 mil, and this is the vintage with the built-in sprayer. Let me know if you guys think this is a good enough deal to keep. I was expecting to get 60 ml. So when I opened it on my unboxing yesterday, I was disappointed, but do let me know if it's worth sending back or I should just keep it. Someone was saying that even these little 36 ml bottles are going for crazy money nowadays. So let me know what you think. 90 bucks is basically what I paid for that. Now let's talk about the EDT again on my right hand. So this feels brighter. The incense and the clove are amped up here on the Gucci-PPR era EDT. There's the breakdown, by the way, if you guys want to see the batch code and all that stuff. So like I said, can't believe I'm going to say that this feels thinner compared to this. This is so dense and heavy, and it goes straight to the base so fast that it makes the Gucci era PPR Opium feel thin, which I never thought this was thin when I wore it on its own. I thought it was a monster, a beast. I smelled it with every breath. So it's not that it necessarily projects less, but it feels thinner. The composition doesn't feel as syrupy, as resinous as the vintage EDT. So there are definitely differences, and this has this aromatic and bitter smell. The clove and the incense somehow, or maybe it's a different type of myrrh, maybe it's some sort of reformulation. I don't know what the deal is with it, but it gives off this strange aromaticness that I never noticed until I did a side-by-side comparison. Maybe it's the lack of oak moss. Maybe it's the lack of vetiver. I don't know. It's something that I just don't know. But now let's talk about the Secret de Parfum, because this is a fragrance that is good enough that I actually bought this bottle and then I instantly went and got a backup bottle from Manouche, because this fragrance blew me away. So these Opium, Opium is attributed, okay, the EDT and the Secret de Parfum, which is a flanker that came out in 1992, by the way. These came out, the original EDT is credited to 1977. Jean-Louis Suizac is the perfumer, and he also is the perfumer of the flanker, which I love it when brands bring back the original perfumer to do the flanker, okay? And the Secret de Parfum has this very sticky, resinous feel. So the best way that I can describe it, it's in this, my left elbow crux there, is it almost feels like you take like a cheese knife, like a spreading knife, and you just kind of spread a layer of opium. Just spread it on your skin. You know, like it's like you can just spread the resins. It's so thick. It does smell just a little bit sweeter. By the way, I should mention that this, when I compare this and this, okay, if you compare these two, again, I know it's a lot of comparisons, 4 comparisons, but Youth Dew feels much drier and much less sweet than the Secret de Parfum EDP. Now, this has been discontinued. They now do this EDP concentration, but if you can find the Secret de Parfum, get it, because it feels like the myrrh is amped up here. The myrrh is a little bit heavier, rich, sweet. When it opened, I thought that it opened up almost even more bitter than the other iterations, but now as it's dried, it feels the opposite. It feels like it's switched, and now the Secret de Parfum feels the sweetest of all of them. This feels the most aromatic. The Secret de Parfum smells the sweetest, and then I think these two are the closest. Youth Dew and the vintage EDT. So I'm a little torn. Oh, the other thing I should mention is the Secret de Parfum. The Secret de Parfum also smells like the vanilla is a little bit amped up. So obviously it's not a vanilla fragrance. It's an oriental that focuses on the myrrh and the benzoin, and it almost gives off this styrax-like vibe. This benzoin styrax type thing going on. But I think myrrh is the star of the show here. This is one of the most amazing myrrhs I've ever smelled. And it doesn't have the aromaticness of this. So this actually might be a little bit more versatile, but honestly, I love them all so much I would wear them at any time. I've got 4 different fragrances on me right now, and they all smell similar enough that I probably smell amazing, but my OCD is kind of kicking in because I have 1 scent of the day, and I wear that all day. I don't change fragrances at night. You know, I'm a 1 scent of the day man, and then I take a shower, and the next day it's a completely new scent. So to have 4 on for you guys is it's kind of getting to me. The other thing I should mention is I thought that maybe, in the dry down, that the vintage EDT and the more current EDT, the Gucci-PPR era version, if you will, I thought maybe they would like come together. You know, maybe the start was a little bit different, the heavier oak moss and stuff like that here. And then this opened up heavy on the cloves. Clove, when this opened, was the #1 note that I would have said that I got. And I thought that maybe as time went on, they would have kind of converged, like two lines coming together, but they didn't. They stayed completely apart from each other. These two never came together in the way that I expected. The vintage and the current are quite different. The ones that are closest, I would say, are these two. So, value for money. If this is expensive, and it is, vintage opium obviously is expensive and now very sought after for this Charles of the Ritz version, or whatever you want to call it. This is the best bang for your buck, by far. If you can get a bottle of vintage Youth Dew for 20 bucks like I did, and they're out there, I've seen them. Look at the color of the juice too. My God, it looks like a cola. It looks like you're holding an old Coke can, doesn't it? If you can get this for 20 bucks, the value for this is outstanding for this type of perfumery. It's so sticky. It almost feels like it's like gunked up the cap there. Can you see that? I don't know if you can see the gunk on there. Oh, it's so good. So if you can get a good deal on this, you know, it's floral, it's spicy, it's oriental. It's one of the best, one of the first greatest orientals. Everyone gives the first oriental to this, or one of the greatest orientals to opium, and rightly so, but this deserves so much more credit. There's clove here, but somehow it stands out much more in this than this. So if you don't like clove, I would say, you know, sample it. It might not bother you because there's so much more going on, but it's toned, the clove is kind of toned down here. I think the florals are amped up, and that, I think the frankincense is amped up too. That oily frankincense, it's not all about the myrrh here. There's other things going on. Whereas like if you want more of a myrrh heavy fragrance, go with the Secret de Parfum. So, I hope you've enjoyed this. I wanted to, you know, give it as much credit as I could because it's a fragrance that deserves it. It's in my top 10, and rightly so. Although, after comparing these two today, it almost really gave me pause that, well, you can see the difference in the juice color. You know, it really gave me pause, like, what else am I missing? Because I would have said there's no way to improve on this. This is a masterpiece, and I can't imagine, my brain just couldn't fathom improving on this formula. And then I did a comparison, and I do think it's improved upon by the vintage. So I don't know. I don't know what to do, whether to keep this or not. I feel like I should have gotten the 60 ml I was promised, but maybe it's a good enough deal that I should still keep it. That's how much juice is left, basically. It's a 36 ml bottle, so it's not huge, but it's good to have, especially since they're getting rarer. And it does have the 80 degrees right here in the corner. I don't know if you can see that. So it obviously is old to some degree. How old, I would probably guess mid-80s, but I don't know exactly how to, there's no sticker. I think most of these have a sticker on the bottom, and this one came off or something. But let me know. Let me know what you guys think. Let me know what your thoughts are. If you have experience with opium, if you've tried these and compared them, probably not many people are going to have all 4 of these to be able to do, you know, comparisons of, is my guess. But so I hope that this kind of content is valuable to you, and I hope if you're looking for some of these vintages, check out Enchanté Perfumes in Canada. Anouge is absolutely amazing, and highly trustworthy, and you know, just a great guy to work with. It's a pleasure to deal with people like that along your journey. And then, of course, all the info and feedback that you guys have given me. So I hope I've done this justice. Please let me know in the comments what you think. Thank you again for watching. And depending on the mail, we may have another unboxing today, if not probably tomorrow or the day after. So cheers, and I'll see you again soon with another video. Bye-bye.